This is the Rambling Reporter speaking. We're going to talk Turkey and give you some close-up views of the famous old city of Constantinople. Constantinople stands on the dividing line between Europe and Asia, on the Straits of Bosphorus, which connect the Black Sea with the Sea of Marmara, the Dardanelles, and the Mediterranean. For thousands of years, this city has been considered a key to world empire. 300 years ago, Constantinople was the richest and the largest city in Europe, and it's still one of the most beautiful, built on the hills, with the domes and the minarets of the royal mosques rising high above the roofs. Connecting the old section with the new is the Galata Bridge, built on pontoons, so it can be opened up to let the ships pass out of the River Golden Horn that flows through the city. It used to be said that once every day a representative of every race on earth crossed the Galata Bridge. But now Turkey is more or less reserved for the Turks, and many changes have taken place in Constantinople, and yet these mosques, built by the old sultans, still stand out among the world's most beautiful buildings. For hundreds of years, Constantinople was the center of the Mohammedan faith and the most powerful enemy of Christian Europe. But today the gates are open. Christians may enter all the mosques and walk about freely in the shadow of the crescent that ornaments the highest dome. But the religion of the Prophet still lives in Turkey, and 5 times a day the muezzin comes out on the high balcony of the minaret to call the faithful to prayer. But just to show you how times have changed, he now wears a golf cap and European clothes instead of the picturesque costume of long ago. Only these religious teachers who read the Quran inside the mosque wear the turban and flowing robes. And we see the people making their ablutions outside the mosque before going into prayer. They no longer wear the Turkish fez, but the Mohammedan faith requires them to wash their hands, feet, and faces, and to remove their shoes before entering the mosque in order not to profane the holy carpet. There are no women at these fountains because women rarely go into the mosque. Religion is left to the men. Why, in the old days, it was generally considered that a woman's soul was hardly worth saving. But not in every case. Now, in this oldest mosque in the city, we see this great flock of pigeons, and according to the story, when this mosque was being built, everyone in Constantinople was expected to contribute something. A poor old woman brought a pair of pigeons, the only thing she owned, and for that unselfish act her name was written in paradise, and the pigeons are still fed in her memory. Outside the mosque after morning prayer, we find these crowds of men drinking coffee and smoking, and we notice that the old-timers still use the hubble-bubble, the pipe that perfumes the smoke by drawing it through scented water. And near the mosque, we find these 2 young ladies trying to mix old ideas with new. You see, they're doing an Oriental dance from the knees up and a Charleston from the knees down. Wandering through the streets, we get a sample of the daily life of the old quarter. We see the camels march along with their loads of firewood, and we see the butcher driving his mutton to the market on the hoof. He manages to pilot this flock of sheep through a tangle of wagons and people. You know, it's a typical Oriental scene, but it's dressed in European clothes. And the Turkish porters, the famous strong men of the East, go by with their enormous baskets. The peddler of sweet cakes and Turkish delights carries his stock in a glass case, which is made especially to keep the flies in. Even the soda fountain travels on legs and sells a sweet syrup called sherbet. It's a popular drink with old and young in Turkey because the Mohammedan religion forbids intoxicating liquor. But when you've seen how this soda fountain man sterilizes his glasses for the next customer, well, you may think that strong drink would be just as safe. Water travels on 4 legs in Constantinople, and that's because most of the houses have no plumbing and depend on the public fountains for their water supply. The peddlers draw it off in old oil cans, load it onto their donkeys, and sell it through the streets at 2.5 cents a can. Some of the oldest streets are built like stairways, winding up and down the hill. And in this old section we still see a veiled woman now and then, wearing the heavy black curtains that every Turkish lady wore in public until a few years ago. But in contrast, the modern Turkish working girl passes by dressed like our own flapper. The old streets are lined with small shops and bazaars, with the awnings hung out over the sidewalks. But the new streets have trolley cars and handsome marble houses, while the city seems almost more European than Oriental. And yet, we're always running across things that remind us of old Turkey. Now, take this fine beard, for example. It's fit for any sultan, and its owner's so proud of it that he has it washed right out in the street in full view of the passing crowd. But what has become of the romantic side of Constantinople that we used to read about, the Sultan and all his wives? Well, we'll visit the Seraglio Palace and see if there's any of it left. So we begin at the gate of the old harem, a gate that no Christian man ever passed in the old days. But now we enter this inner court, and along this gloomy passageway, in small rooms without windows, live the Sultan's ladies, entirely shut off from the outside world. Not a very lively existence, according to most accounts. And here in the harem grounds we see the Baghdad kiosk, built in memory of the Turkish capture of Baghdad. And beside it is the marble floor, where the favorite dancing girls performed for an audience of one man. That man was the Sultan, who sat in that little pergola on the left and threw gold pieces to the girls who pleased him. No pictures of those dancing girls exist, and that scene could never have been photographed for love of money. But now we leave the palace on the hill and sail up the Bosphorus Strait in search of more romantic places. And we pass the great Dolmabahce Palace. This magnificent building has a grim history. So many murders were committed in it that the famous old Sultan Abdul Hamid refused to live here. He claimed that it always smelled of blood. And now some of the buildings have been partly burned and fallen into ruin. Marble palaces line both shores of this stream that divides Europe from Asia, and in them the old Turkish rulers lived in Oriental splendor. It was a great life while it lasted, and it lasted 469 years. From the time when Muhammad II, the conqueror of Constantinople, built that old fortress up there on the hill, down to the day in 1922 when Turkey became a republic. And on that day, the last Turkish Sultan left his palace and rode through the streets of the city for the last time. And as he rode away, old Turkey, with all its glamour, rode with him and passed out of the picture for good. And now, Turkey has a president. We meet him on the porch of his simple country house, wearing a sports shirt and a plain business suit. This is Mustafa Kemal Pasha, the man who made over Turkey, abolished the wearing of the fez and veil, emancipated the women of his country, and did away with the harem, and convinced the Turks that one wife is enough for any man. Of course, when he did this, he threw a lot of hard-working storks out of jobs. And so now we see these famous Turkish birds loafing in their nests on the housetops, and as they look out over the city, why, they probably say to each other, the old town ain't what it used to be. And something of this same idea is in our own minds as we sail away from Constantinople, which has changed everything, including its name. They now call it Istanbul. Well, that's rather a relief. You know, we won't have to try to spell Constantinople anymore.